Hi, my name is Marcus McNeil, and this is my video presentation for Computer Science course 4733, Computer Ethics. Let's get started. The issue I chose to discuss today is, should the public give up civil liberties for the use of the internet and other technology? I'm going to start off by simply saying no. But the realization is people do it every day, entrusting information and expression to those who govern these websites and applications. See, it is a software developer's responsibility to consider the public's constitutional rights when developing software. So I'm going to highlight the First and Fourth Amendments in this presentation as examples of what isn't significantly protected. There are dangers behind accepting the trade-offs of the internet for the freedom of speech and the right to privacy. What can be done to protect the public? Is a software developer ethically correct if he creates products that knowingly infringe on these constitutional rights? I argue that we should not have to give up our rights for the trade-off of use. But first, let me give you another brief history lesson on the First and Fourth Amendment. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, religion, and press. It also gives citizens the right to a peaceful protest and to petition the government. It was a part of the Bill of Rights that was added to the Constitution December 15th of 1791. Two things I want you to keep in mind about the First Amendment is there is no legal age limit for the freedom of speech in the U.S., and you do not have to be a citizen to be afforded its rights. Now, let's talk about the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued without probable cause. This breaks down the foundation of three issues I will discuss. The first issue being the lack of freedom of speech. I chose social media platforms as the first place which we should explore regarding the First Amendment rights to the freedom of speech. See, the internet is a free speech zone, which is afforded the same protections given to books, magazines, and newspapers. Even though the internet is a free speech zone, there have been landmark cases which have tested justice's scales, such as the 1997 case Reno versus American Civil Liberties Union, which we're going to call the ACLU, which overturned the 1996 Communications Decency Act that we learned about in class, which a person could be fined up to $250,000 or face up to 2 years imprisonment. In the case of ACLU, argued that censorship was unconstitutional because it criminalized expression. This landmark case undoubtedly impacted the way we are able to view social media platforms today. Developers of sites such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram have implemented rules with similar values as the Constitution, but also take away some liberties of free speech. Some of the First Amendment similarities include regulations on hate speech, which is speech that attacks people based on the race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or religion. I'm sure we can all agree that hate speech is negative, but this speech is still protected from the government intervention unless it incites or is likely to incite lawless actions. This is not the case on social media platforms such as Snapchat, Facebook, and Twitter, where your user agreement bans this type of dialogue. A few sites such as Reddit hate speech is not against policy unless it incites violence, which is how the government handles it. I'm sure developers of these platforms can argue that user safety is the reason it is necessary to address these types of speech, as social media can quickly spread malicious commentary quickly to a large group of people. Even though the speech may be ethically wrong, it doesn't give the right not to allow someone to express themselves freely. The right to think and form one's own opinion seems like a basic human right. If the freedom of speech is taken away by social media platforms and put into specific categories, aren't we giving up the right to thought and conforming to the mindset of the platform? How dangerous could this become as social media continues to become a primary source for one's news? Will biasness be imminent? What groups will be excommunicated? Who determines what is right or what may fuel chaos? In a case just last week, Supreme Court ruled that a school district's punishment of a ninth grade cheerleader off-campus rant was too severe. She was kicked off the team for a year. The court ruled in favor of the young girl, saying, and I quote, "It might be tempting to dismiss Brandy Levy's words as unworthy of the robust First Amendment discuss, but sometimes it is necessary to superfluous in order to preserve the necessary." This is exactly where I'm coming from when I suggest that even though not always agreeable, we should still hold a person's ability to express themselves with high regards, as illustrated with the First Amendment rights. Now, not only are we sacrificing freedoms of speech, we also implicitly give up our right to privacy by using the internet. You have undoubtedly seen windows pop up asking us to agree to a detailed list of terms and conditions. Most often, if the agreement is not accepted, the use of the software will be prohibited. To me, this is unethical act forcing a user to agree to something that may not believe or want to accept. Let me say that again. To me, this is an unethical act forcing a user to agree to something they may not believe in or want to accept. Is it even realistic for a person not to agree to the software terms if the magnitude of the software's use is something seen as necessary? Maybe for a job, searching information, or even socializing with peers. These end-user license agreements don't stop at forcing you into clicking the I agree button. They also give up Fourth Amendment rights that allow your privacy to be protected. Even though physical search and seizures of one's home may not be happening, a person's personal computer or software is comparable to that person's house, papers, and effects in which search and seizure is prohibited unless a warrant is issued. So, I ask you, who's policing these situations and what justifies their authority? Many of the end user license agreements have terms where using the product means you will be monitored, even sometimes allowing third-party companies to automatically update your system. In these cases, the company is seizing your personal property and doing with it what it chooses. This can bring up problems such as an invasion of privacy or vulnerability to cyber attacks, which could happen without the consumer's knowledge of being in danger. We're being held hostage by companies that are using data collected as they see fit. Even though these companies business mantras may have nothing to do with policing the use of this information after it's collected. As of right now, there is not much the consumer can do to avoid these user agreements. But there is optimism that consumers, activists, and lawmakers can take action to reform end user licensing agreements. Our Fourth Amendment rights are not only being stolen by end user license agreements, but also by devices that we buy and use in our homes. The interconnection via the internet of computing devices embedded in the everyday objects, enabling them to send and receive data, is called the Internet of Things. Some of the most popular types of IoT wireless tech include cellular, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. Its main use is to drive efficiency where everyday objects can interact with each other. Maybe that's your phone checking who rang your doorbell, or your AC unit turning off because it does not detect anyone in the home. Every day, technology is used to make our life easier, but can be harmful when accessed by someone who may use these devices maliciously. Some of the more notable cybersecurity attacks on such devices include MyRobotnet, aka the Den attack, which happened October 2016, where the largest denial of service, which we're going to call DDoS attack, ever launched happened to service provider Den using the Internet of Things botnet. Now, a botnet is a network of private computers infected with malicious software and controlled as a group without the owner's knowledge. This is the funny thing. Den was a web application security and internet performance management company that provided products to monitor, control, and optimize online infrastructure. The attack led to huge portions of the internet going down, including Twitter, The Guardian, Netflix, Reddit, and CNN. The second exposure were hackable cardiac devices from St. Jude that had vulnerabilities which allowed hackers to access a device, and once it could, they were able to deplete the battery or administer incorrect pacing. This vulnerability is a life critical one in which lives may have been at stake. The hackers actually accessed these devices through its transmitter. Okay, now the last exposure and invasion of privacy came from TrendNet webcam hack, which allowed hackers to access cameras with only the device's IP address. This allowed them to watch and sometimes even listen through the webcam. It is a basic practice to secure IP addresses, and TrendNet's inability to do so came as a surprise. All these attacks were caused by vulnerability in the devices that were used against consumers because they allowed the Internet of Things to be a part of their lives. New advances in technology and the internet are wonderful when developers come up with good products that don't leave us vulnerable. But it is also possible for the public to have too much faith in developers and use products without understanding other implications or threats that may arise, thinking the developer has properly dealt with all the issues. I'm sure it was not the intent of the software developers to release products with such issues. That still does not debunk the fact that the reason these invasions of privacy happen were because of the trade-off for the use of software that communicates quickly over the internet. Ultimately, opening oneself up to the violations of a citizen's Fourth Amendment rights. So, in conclusion, we should not give up civil liberties to be able to use technology. That may make life easier, but what should happen as professional software developers is the continuous adaptation of new policies and practices that protect the public from the misuse of its products. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to discussing this with you guys this week in this module. Have a great day.